with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, April 13th, 2021. My name is Sam Seder. This is the five-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Associate Professor of Religious Studies and Graduate Chair in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Pennsylvania, Anthea Butler. Also the author of White Evangelical Racism, the Politics of Morality in America. Also on the program today, in the wake of the killing of the unarmed Daunte Wright, yet another killing of an unarmed black man just miles from the trial of Derek Chauvin, Minneapolis becomes a militarized zone. U.S. pauses the Johnson & Johnson vaccine deployment to study 6 instances of blood clots amongst the 7 million doses now administered. CDC, meanwhile, says Michigan should shut down support. NCAA reiterates support for trans athletes. Democratic pollsters acknowledge major errors in their 2020 polling. Really? And lastly, the Biden administration ponders whether to fire the head of the Congressional Budget Office in anticipation of the next reconciliation bill. Lastly, it's just in, tech workers at the New York Times have announced that they have formed a union and would ask the company to recognize it. And also, the staff of the think tank's Brookings has also formed a union. All this and more on today's Majority Report. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks for joining us. Of course, joining me as always, Emma Vigeland. Hello, Emma. How are you?
I'm doing well, Sam. How about you?
I'm doing well. I was quite relieved to see that you did not wear the same color shirt as I. Today being Tuesday, usually we have that problem on Wednesdays, but so I switched it up a little bit.
Yeah, I went with multicolored in order to just cover my bases.
Well done. Very well done. All right, let's get right into it. As of yesterday, we were aware that that Daunte Wright had been killed by police in Brooklyn Center, which is a suburb of Minneapolis. And the details weren't quite clear. They have now released body cam footage, which shows the killing of Daunte Wright. Ostensibly, the police officer who shot him at near point blank range was under the impression that she was holding her stun gun, or her taser, I should say, and instead shot him dead. There was no indication that there was any type of life-threatening situation here. But really, I mean, what is quite clear from this, and what has become like increasingly clear, is the practice of police stopping people for traffic violations, or not even, or just, in this instance, it was either, it's unclear. I've heard multiple reports regarding either a registration that had lapsed, or a air freshener hanging from the car window, the rear view mirror.
Both
Regardless,
compelling reasons. I mean, like, it's not like anyone's registrations have lapsed during the pandemic when they can't go to the DMV, and air fresheners, God forbid.
but regardless, the point is that there should be the discretion to pull someone over in these instances should be completely gone. It should be, there is no pulling them over. If you see from from your patrol car a lapsed registration, call it in, send a ticket by mail, have that person try and refute it. If you see a violation, call it in. They do it now in, you can do it. They do it through cameras. If you can do it through cameras, you can do it through people. You just have there's just the value of this to society is minimal, if at all, frankly. These situations are just basically to generate revenue. So let's do it in a touchless manner where there is no point in stopping in these instances, because far too often these things end up with dead people, and for no value to protecting the safety of the community. It just ends up creating dead people, and very often those dead people are unarmed black men. Here is some protests from Brooklyn Center last night. We should just give you a heads up and a warning. There is a language there's language that's not safe for work here. This was live on MSNBC last night, and it exists, and I think it captures the level of anger. And frankly, how could there not be this level of anger? Play this clip.
On you there, Ron, but there's certain things that we can broadcast and there's certain things that we can't.
Caesar.
All right, are you going to stay out here all night, or what's the plan?
I'm going to do what needs to be done.
What's that? What do you just...
Be here for my people.
Get the police gone from our community.
Be here for my people, however long that takes. Be here for my people.
Sure. Do any of you know Dante and the family very well at all?
No, I don't.
No? Does anybody?
Get the fuck out.
Okay.
Don't give a fuck if
all right. Rachel, all right. You heard all that. Some of it rational, and obviously some of it very angry and passionate. But the bottom line here is that these people are still out here in the street. They're not going anywhere. And the police have stopped firing tear gas. They are still behind that fence perimeter that's been built up. Easy.
Fuck the police.
Fuck the police. Okay. What do you want to see happen?
What do I want to say?
What do you want to see happen?
I want to see. All right.
No, I got it.
Got the microphone.
I got it.
I want these bitch ass niggas stop killing innocent black people. They want fucking peace. Okay. And then they get mad.
We're just gonna cut in because we have a responsibility in terms of the language, and
I think that captures, and I mean, frankly, those reactions seem to be completely rational to me. I don't know how else you react to this situation. I mean, we're literally a year out from the killing that started at least this round of protests. And Floyd's dead, and Derek Chauvin is on trial, and then this happens, I don't know, 10 miles away. It's
especially because, so essentially they pulled him over for dubious reasons, right? And then they found that he had outstanding fines due to 2 charges, one of them being a marijuana fine, for the total fines being under $400, which caused this situation to escalate to the point where the officer felt the need to pull out what she thought was her taser. But even so, based on just the little and the complete innocuous nature of the crime here, which the idea that marijuana fines are a crime at all.
Well, they're all misdemeanors. It doesn't even matter what it is. It doesn't even matter. They're misdemeanors.
I understand. It's such an inflection point of so many things. As you mentioned, we're approaching the 1-year anniversary of the murder of George Floyd. This is 15 minutes away from where George Floyd was murdered. We're talking about reparations and decriminalization of marijuana nationwide as more states move to make it legal. And how do we do that in a responsible way that recognizes the harm that marijuana prohibition has caused on communities of color? And all of these things are just coalescing to this like darkly poetic moment which resulted in the death of yet another black man. And Biden's first response, I don't want to see looting in the streets. What do you expect when the harm has been done over and over again? And so, we keep trying to paper over this by just white politicians, Democrats like Joe Biden, particularly saying, no looting in the streets. Let's be old school about this, law and order, etc. We're past that. This is a point where we need to actually repair the harm, or else this is going to keep happening. And it's like the frustration is palpable. And of course it's like fear, imbued with fear for communities of color in so many ways and decades of this.
I mean, it seems pretty straightforward to just at the very least, you just stop the traffic stops. That's the first thing to start. This is the low hanging fruit, folks. Just, we just need to continually lop off functions of the police department that are not there, but for, essentially harassment and fishing expeditions, because this is the way they end up.
And sorry, just really quickly, when was Oscar Grant murdered? Do we know? At Fruitvale Station? It was the same story. Cop thought it was a taser. Another man, like, there's so even the minute details of this, even the very specific details are repeated details. That's how frequent this is.
Yep. All right, we got to take a quick break. We'll be back with Anthea Butler. She is the author of White Evangelical Racism: The Politics of Morality in America. We'll be back in just a moment. Meanwhile, today's show is sponsored by, we got a couple of sponsors today, but today's show sponsored by Blinkist. It makes it much easier for you to sit down and learn stuff, either by reading or by listening. Blinkist is for anyone who cares about learning, who doesn't have a lot of time. Blinkist takes the key ideas and insights from over 4,000 nonfiction bestsellers in over 27 categories, gather them together in 15-minute text and audio explainers, or blinks. Use the blinks to get into a topic quickly. You can find new topics to grow from, figure out which books you want to spend more time reading or listening to more deeply. Blinkist has even teamed up with popular podcast creators to blink those for you too, so you can get to the heart of an episode fast. 15 million people are already using Blinkist to broaden their knowledge. 27 nonfiction categories like self-improvement, management, mindfulness, and more. Folks, I've talked about Blinkist quite a bit, and I use it quite a bit as well. I think I got like 2 or 3 different categories the way I use it. One is those books that are sort of how-to that I may not be interested in reading, but I could use the help. Maybe in just like learning how to be more friendly, or, the 80-20 concepts in business, that type of stuff. But I'm not going to read the whole book, but I want the key takeaways. And then there's other books that I'm not that interested in reading, but I feel like I need to know them. I went through that with Blowout by Rachel Maddow. Wanted to That's it's not necessarily one that I was going to read, or that Rick Wilson thing, everything Trump touches dies. Like, I wasn't going to read the full Rick Wilson book. I knew what that guy was about, but I was just curious, like, what's he saying? But then you can also, there are things like, maybe this is a book I want to read, and it can lead you to that in that way. The same thing with the Blinkist shortcast. You can quickly catch up on podcast episodes you've missed. Now, right now, Blinkist has a special offer for our audience. You go to Blinkist.com/Majority Report, start your free 7-day trial, and get 25% off a Blinkist premium membership. That's Blinkist, spelled Blinkist. Blinkist.com/Majority Report. You get 25% off and a 7-day free trial. Blinkist.com/Majority Report. Oh, this is a good one. This is one of those sponsors that I was using, and then they just coincidentally became a sponsor of the show. Folks know I have an affinity for apple trees. Where do I get my apple trees? Well, do I want them to produce in 12 years or in a couple? I get them at fastgrowingtrees.com. The fact is, their trees are not necessarily faster growing, but they ship you trees that are fully formed, not massive ones, like 3, 4 feet, 5 feet you can get. Skip the big box stores. Head to fastgrowingtrees.com. They are the world's largest online nursery. It's a better way to buy trees, shrubs, and plants for your home and yard. It's fastgrowingtrees.com. You don't have to wait in lines. You don't have to mess up your car. You don't get a lackluster selection. Go to fastgrowingtrees.com. You choose from thousands of varieties, trees, shrubs, plants. They're expertly curated to thrive in your area. You just, you make sure you know what your growing zone is. Doesn't matter what you're looking for. Fruit trees, privacy trees, shade trees, added color for your yard. Every plant is shipped with a well-developed root system ready to explode with new growth. That is the key. You're not going to, none of these things are going to die on you. They're already. This year, I got a bunch of tall grass things. I've gotten the bloomerang tree in the past. I've gotten Korean pear trees, and of course, a couple of Arkansas black apple trees, and all of them thriving. Now through June 30th, go to fastgrowingtrees.com/Majority Report. Get 15% off. That's 15% off at fastgrowingtrees.com/Majority. fastgrowingtrees.com/Majority. I wish I had known about that 15% because I got those grass things without waiting for. I didn't realize.
Can you be more specific about grass things?
It's not marijuana. They don't sell that.
No, I understand.
Tall grass. Grass. I don't know what else to say.
Okay.
Oh, and Mother's Day is coming up. And if there's ever been a year to make the moms in your life feel loved and appreciated on Mother's Day, this is the one. People have been dealing with a lot of distance. That's hard. You can honor the special woman in your life with a heartfelt, sentimental gift the whole family can cherish forever. That's StoryWorth. StoryWorth is an online service. It helps every mother figure in your life share stories through thought-provoking questions about their memories and personal thoughts. It's a great way to engage with them, especially if you can't be in person together. It's also just a great gift for the entire family, your kids or your brothers and sisters, to get the stories of your parents' life or your grandparents' life. What could be better? What they do is each week they email a different story prompt. It's a question that you wouldn't think to ask, or you wouldn't think that would provide much, but they do. What was your favorite car? Where was the first time that, you went on a date? I mean, all sorts of different things that you wouldn't even contemplate asking. And somehow it's just easier when it's done sort of like through a third party, and it provokes people to start telling stories. And then after 1 year, StoryWorth will compile all of your mom's stories, including photos, into a beautiful keepsake book that's shipped for free. This is a great way to stay in touch and to keep those stories alive. And now is do not dally on this. I can take it from my personal experience. Is not something you want to dilly-dally about. A great way to just sort of stay in touch with your folks. And it's also just, on a weekly basis, it's a good conversation piece. Frankly, I've been thinking about just getting it for myself so that I'm doing it for my kids. But right now, you can give your mom the most meaningful gift this Mother's Day with StoryWorth. Get started right away. No shipping required by going to storyworth.com/majority. You get $10 off your first purchase. That's storyworth.com/majority for $10 off. Okay, I want to welcome to the program Anthea Butler. She is Associate Professor of Religious Studies and Graduate Chair in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. She is also the author of White Evangelical Racism, The Politics of Morality in America. Anthea, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Sam. Glad to be here.
I'm here, of course, with Emma Vigeland as well.
I am.
Your book is incredibly timely. I mean, both sort of like in a broader sense in terms of this era, and particularly now when we have just sort of just more, I guess maybe some of the most explicit forms that we can see in our modern era of racism. Another unarmed black man being shot by police. Then maybe we can circle back around to that, but I want to get into your book. I think it's fascinating, and it's something like I have sort of nibbled around on the edges. But you are coming from an evangelical background. I mean, it just set the table for us on that, and also just be, I'll try and remind you during this conversation. But like I don't know the taxonomy, frankly, of different Christian practices and whatnot. So at any time that you can add some of that, that would be helpful.
Okay, I will try. The taxonomy is this. I'll tell the short story. The short story is I did not come into evangelicalism because of birth. I came in it because of accident. Somebody invited me to go to church when I was in my 20s and became that, and went to an evangelical seminary, actually Fuller Seminary, which is the biggest evangelical seminary in the country. And that's where I got my first introduction for evangelicalism. And for me, it was, part of a good experience. And then it started not to be such a good experience. I think in part because there were all these sorts of rules and things about, whether you could have sex or not, whether you could, how you voted. And I should say that this was a time period in part of the book where two big things had happened. One was the Rodney King trial, and the other was basically the sort of racial reconciliation things that were happening all of the time, right? In terms of evangelical churches. So it was an interesting time to be looking at race. And so when I finished my PhD and realized that I was sort of cycling out of that religious tradition, I often thought about the ways in which it looked that evangelical was, one, always associated with white when we talk about that in the public, and especially for politics. And then secondarily, how most of the cultural things and some of the theology is coded as white. And so while you have Black and Asian and Latinx evangelicals who would believe some of the same kind of Christian beliefs, right? They are not considered to be evangelical because they're not white Republican voters. And I think that's part of the core of why I wrote the book, because I felt like two things. One was that morality was being used as a shield, as a power grab politically. And secondarily, the ways in which that morality is always coded is through, the family, i.e. the white family, and everybody else isn't, is I would say, how to put this nicely, subservient to that. And that's probably a bad word, but I think that's also a true word and how to describe it.
So, for those of us who don't know, like, what constitutes an evangelical? Like, how is, like, when you decide to join the evangelical church, what are you signing up for, both, like, I guess, theologically
Mhm.
and maybe in terms of practice.
Yeah, practice and culture. Okay. So what you're signing up for basically is you have a belief in Jesus Christ, or what people would call the Bebington Quadrilateral. It means that you want to be mission minded. You believe in the in Scripture. You believe that Jesus Christ is the Messiah, quote unquote, right? And that you have a commitment to spreading the gospel. So if we take the word evangelical, in Greek, it just means spreading good news, evangelion, right? And then the second thing you're signing up for is a host of practices. And those practices may be, regular church attendance, Bible study, learning scriptures. It also means some cultural things. You might be, asked to dress a certain way. You might ask to be, not watch secular kinds of things like television or even listening to the Majority Report, right? You might want to listen to some other kind of programming that is more Christian minded. And so there's a evangelical author, George Marsden, who said, an evangelical is anyone who likes Billy Graham. I would probably reframe that because it was an old way of thinking about it. I would probably say now an evangelical is probably anybody who voted for Donald Trump right now, unfortunately. But, because a lot of evangelicals have found themselves alienated from the MAGA kind of style of Trumpism. So I think maybe that's a better, 2021 way to talk about evangelicalism, because it's been so politically focused in these last 30 or 40 years.
And
All right.
part,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Emma.
yeah, no, but part of what I think gives them credence to I guess behave with this entitlement, at least white evangelicals, right, is that this concept of performing morality, which
Yes.
gives them this kind of authority, which you touch on. Can you talk about that concept in terms of their political power and cultural power?
Sure, absolutely, because I think that's a really important part of the book, Emma. One of the things that I think is really important about this performance of morality is that they can say, well, we believe in marriage, we believe in same-sex marriage, we believe in the family, we believe that, abortion is a sin and that we are pro-life. And those kinds of issues are the issues that they forefront. Now, let me give you kind of a little quick history here, because I think this is really important and I want to use it as an arc. Back in the 1980s, Ronald Reagan, was divorced, but evangelicals voted for him anyway because they said they were for him, right? We get to 2016, it doesn't matter that Donald Trump has been married 3 times and divorced and had that little Hollywood, thing that happened about grabbing things, right? Mm-hmm. It didn't matter to them. And so what I'm really interested in is the fact that for evangelicals, morality used to be a very important part of how they thought about first themselves, secondarily their religious leaders, and third, the political leaders. But now we get to 2016 and 2021, and it's like, that's out the window now. We just need a guy who's going to give us what we want. And so I think what we've seen is sort of a declension in the ways in which they use morality, first of all, even though at the same time, I would say the biggest moral issue right now that they still really cling on to is about abortion. I think that's never going to go away. Pro-life is never going away with evangelicals.
All right, so let's go back to the origins, and so that we can see that arc of the sort of jettisoning of morality as as morality, as opposed to really, I mean, in many respects, a justification for political action. I mean, I don't know how else to express that, but so let's go back to the foundations, and as you write, racism is not a bug in the context of evangelicalism. It is a feature. Let's talk about the foundations of that racism in evangelicalism, and this goes back. You start your book this way in the 1800s.
Yeah, I do. And I started with slavery because there's a narrative about how evangelicals like to tell their story. They like to tell it like, we were abolitionists. We were, we did missionary work. We did all of these good things. But, the fact is that they were also slaveholders. And there were also people who believed that, people of African descent were inferior, both, morally and physically and mentally. And so what I'm showing at the beginning of the book is how these ideas about slavery, which were hinged in scripture, whether we're talking about the curse of Ham or the curse of Cain, or, or polygenesis, this dual creation, where they thought that Black people were the aberration creation and that that white people were actually the true creators of God, right? And from God. I think these kinds of issues in slavery were really important in terms of forming certain kinds of evangelical ideas. And so when we look from slavery on forward, and also to think about the ways in which churches broke up, and then we have sort of this, focus in on the lost cause, right? Where you get a kind of idea about what, white women in the family are supposed to look like vis-a-vis other families, you can start to see where this moral foundation starts. And then you bring that up to the 20th century.
Well, and so help me through this. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
presumably, just about everybody, all the white people in the United States, and I shouldn't say all the white people, but I mean certainly the vast majority. There were abolitionist movements, and you referred to this as the white savior sort of, I guess, a notion in which evangelicals are trying to present themselves at that point. And so the real issue is, how much was the evangelicism used to justify slavery? I mean, other people could find it in other ways that they would justify the slavery.
Yeah.
But what work did evangelicism do to justify slavery, and how integral was that at that time?
I mean, it's very integral. If we think about it, it's about the Bible, essentially. And I mean, I think one of the things that I'm always trying to talk to my students and people who don't know this history is that you can't think about this like everybody's got a Bible in their hand. Most people don't. They're hearing this from preachers, they're hearing it from other people. So these ideas get put forward orally. It's not just about how you read them or whatever. And a lot of this has to do with preaching. Who's saying what? How are they saying it? So let me give you an example of somebody that I think is really important. George Whitefield is known as a great, basically evangelist and missionary, right? But most people don't know that he held slaves. And he used the money that he made from slave labor to fund all his orphanages and everything else. I mean, this is George Whitefield. There's a statue of him on my campus. They're going to take it down, but there's a statue of it on Penn's campus. And so I think when we start to think about, slavery, we have to think about what are people doing during this time period who would be termed evangelicals, who are part of a great evangelical history. It is not to say that all evangelicals were for slavery, but it is to say that evangelicals have written a certain kind of story about themselves that has left this foundational story out. And I'm here to kind of help get them back on track and make them realize this is part of your foundational story. Just as much as you believe that, that you were here to save the poor benighted slaves and, people around the world and all of this other stuff through missionary work, you also were part of slavery. You were part of, positioning yourselves in a way that promoted these things. And some of these same ideas come forward to the 20th century and to the political and social realm.
Does it, I guess I'm, because there is this quality of everybody was like, how could the evangelicals support Donald Trump? I mean, as we were saying, like this seems completely out of character. And I think, and if I understand, the point of the book is to say like, no, this has already been embedded in your character. And it's just that, that the historiography has obscured this. But is there something specific that evangelicism, maybe, am I saying that right?
Evangelicalism.
Is it built upon a white supremacy, or is it just far more tolerant of than evangelicals will have liked to have told themselves?
I would say both and. I would say it's far more tolerant, first of all, but, we have to deal with the history of this country. I mean, there's been all kinds of conversations about things like the 1619 Project versus the 1776 Project. How do we teach these things? And I think one of the, tragedies of teaching right now in America is that people just don't know the history. I mean, one of the reasons why I did this book was like, I'm just writing history. This is straight up stuff, everything you can prove. There's nothing different about this. And I think for evangelicals, especially, the marriage of their history, a religious history, this Christian history, with a narrative about America. America is a Christian nation. America is here to protect the world. These kinds of stories that evangelicals have told themselves and have told the rest of us, right, about what this history and narrative is, I think it's really important to step back and say, that's not all of the history. You're not telling the whole story. You have to think about what the story has been like and how it has been affected you. And so that's why I think for me, it was important to write this book at this time, because you might be tempted to just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, well, this is because of Trump and they just like Trump because he's going to give them justices and everything else. But it's not Trump. I mean, Trump is kind of like the end of this. He's not the end of the story, but he's kind of like this point in a long story that has gone on about, political action and power and how it's gained through religion and religious means.
You mentioned Ronald Reagan earlier, and it just I always return to the fact that he started Martin Luther King Day, right, in order to just kind of sap it, in my view, of the real activism and the heart behind the civil rights movement. And Billy Graham, who you mentioned earlier, he appeared with Martin Luther King, but yet at the same time didn't support civil rights. Was there some of that quality in what you're talking about here, where the performance of morality and even kind of throwing chum out to the civil rights movement in order to keep up that appearance of morality just upheld the white supremacy that was underpinning evangelicism, as you say, for so many decades?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, part of it is about, how do you make the appearances versus what the reality is, right? And so this performance that I've talked about is about how do we make this clean? So, Reagan may put this up and the states fight this, famously John McCain was one of the people who was against having, Martin Luther King Day, right? Or we can think about, there's a great picture in the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., that has a tableau from the 20th century of one side is Billy Graham and the other side is Martin Luther King. And the first time I saw it, I started laughing because I was like, y'all are putting them together like they were best buddies, but this is not the case. They're not best buddies. And, there's a moment in which they're together in 1956 when he does his, rally at Madison Square Garden, where he prays before Billy Graham comes on. But after that, he's very, Billy Graham is very critical of the civil rights movement because he doesn't think that this can happen. He actually says, I don't think that little Black boys and little white girls and, everybody not gonna be together till they get to heaven. And I think that's a pretty big statement about where he thinks this is gonna go. But then he has to change his mind when it doesn't go there, right? So I think that, whether we're talking about Reagan or we're talking about Billy Graham, or we're talking about especially the ways in which these racial reconciliation things that the Southern Baptists or Pentecostals or, Promise Keepers that I talk about in the book have happened, I think there are sincere people in the middle of this, right? But there's one key thing that always is important. The issue for evangelicals is individual sin. And so it's like if you and I were talking and, you said to me, and I'm not saying this is you, Emma, but if you said to me, I feel like I'm racist, and I would say, well, Emma, I really know that you're not, and that God's going to forgive you of that or whatever, that's individual, right? But they don't see the structural kinds of racism, nor do they see the structural kinds of issues that are there about white supremacy and the ways in which that continues to perpetuate itself. So there's two different conversations that are being had. And what I'm trying to do is get people to understand what the structures are underneath this, how they think about it, and how maybe they can take a step back for a moment and think about what has happened to their movement because of it.
But what is it? I mean, why do they want to sort of like obscure? I mean, like where, like when you take, let's say, the Lost Cause, and you take a Bill Graham saying, sort of like projecting that he's for civil rights, and the elements of the racial reconciliation programs that, some of which were sincere and others which were like, this is an important thing for us to project. Like, what is the importance of that projection? Is there a theological grounding for it? Or is the fact that it's, I don't know how if you have a deep abiding belief in the existence of God, How do you think you're going to get away with that anyways?
Well, if you think God is white, you can get away with it, right? Well, so I mean, let's start there, okay? So, but I mean, seriously, I think I take your question very seriously, and I think part of it is about politeness. It's like a sense in which, you know, Christianity, you're supposed to love your brother, love one another, and all this stuff. And so, what you hear people say is that, well, of course, I love my Christian Black brother or sister, or my, you know, my Mexican brother or sister, or whoever, right? I'm not a racist. You know, you hear this all the time, right? You can see it, you know, happening in social media and everything. But when we start to deal with the structural issues about racism, you know, and the ways in which the structures of racism have hurt other people, whether we're talking about education or economics and all this stuff, what it invariably comes back to is that, well, you know, people have made individual choices, and if you would just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all this stuff. And so there's a narrative that's not just a religious one. And I think this is really important for you and listeners to understand, is that these kinds of Christianity gets mixed up with ideas about Americanism and individualism and capitalism, and they play out in certain kinds of ways. And I see them playing out this way in evangelicalism, so that where, you know, in the 19th century, you would think, well, we're supposed to take care of the poor and everything else. By the 21st century, it's like, well, those people don't need health care. They don't need this because they're not working. God's not blessing them. And this is the transformation of a movement that used to care about these things to a movement that thinks that people who don't have health care, or people who are broke, or people who are poor don't deserve to be taken care of because that's their individual problem.
Was that transformation, well, I guess, when did that take place? Was that essentially over like during the Carter era? The moral majority, when Bob Jones was losing its tax status. Okay, tell us about that, because so I mean, and I want you to fill that in, but just so that I can keep track of where we are, there is this sort of existence of this malignancy within evangelicalism that they had kidded themselves on some level by that didn't exist, and basically it's almost like a it's like almost like a dormant allergy, and the context was right for this allergy to come out. And that was in the late 70s or early mid 70s, I guess.
Yeah, let's say the allergy was there, but the allergy was buttressed by the fact that you had white leadership and white patriarchal leadership. I want to make that really clear. This is about, you know, men. It's not, you know, women play a part in this too, but they don't have power. But what happens in the 70s is a couple of things. And so the normal story where you would think about evangelicals being involved in the political is that, oh, it's about, you know, Roe versus Wade, and that happened. Well, that's only a small part of it. The bigger part that brings people together is actually Bob Jones University, and Bob Jones being forced to integrate or else lose their tax status. And Bob Jones University won't do it. They lose their tax status. This is a very simplification of the story, but that's really helpful. Why does this affect evangelicals so much? Well, because they had put together lots of Christian academies, or what people, you know, used to call segregation academies, that said, well, we're Christian, so we don't have to let everybody in. We can do this post Brown versus Board, you know, 1954, right? And so we still have white schools, but they're just Christian schools. And this threatened the tax exempt status of all of these schools. And so this was the thing, the organizing force that brings together all of these people to bring the moral majority. It also is a moment, which I think is really important to say, given what we're dealing with right now, a moment where people begin to realize the power of evangelical votes. And so Paul Weyrich, who was actually a Catholic, who brings this in, says, we don't want everybody to vote. You think about good government, we don't want that. We need to make sure that everybody doesn't vote, because we want to make sure we hold on to power. And it's in that moment, you know, alongside of, you know, Jerry Falwell and the moral majority and all these forces that come together, that you see the ascension of Ronald Reagan, who actually doesn't do as much as you would think for evangelicals, but he really does solidify a way in which they believe that they can have political power. If you want to think about somebody who actually is probably an even more important actor in this show that doesn't get a lot of press, it's Pat Robertson. because Pat Robertson's Christian Coalition, begins in, 89 after he loses. And when they understand that they could give voting guides to people at churches and tell them, take this into the polling booth. You can vote the way that we tell you to vote for people who are Christian candidates or evangelical kind of candidates. Then that becomes a more serious effort in which to how to bring those voters together so that when you finally get who I like to call the real evangelical president, not Donald Trump, but George W. Bush, that coalition is solid and brings in somebody who, is for compassionate conservatism, but still plays the same old tricks that everybody else is playing all the time in the Republican Party.
Pat Robertson's still broadcasting.
Yes, still broadcasting, barely.
That he ran for president. I mean, I don't know if people recall that. That confluence, because this move into politics, essentially, right? I mean, this is the moment where the concept of leave unto Caesar that which is Caesar's goes out the window.
Yeah.
And it is done. I mean, let's be clear. It's done to protect segregation, right?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
It's like, we're going to lose our tax exempt status. Well, okay, you can keep your tax exempt status. You just have to not have a segregated school. Oh, yeah. Well, wait a second. No, no, that's a bridge too far.
Yeah.
And so this is, and at that point, it's almost as if there was like the floodgates opened and it was like, okay, now that sort of we've been laid bare, we might as well just go all in. Mm-hmm. And it becomes this morality of evangelicalism becomes highly malleable and really just more of like a form of virtue signaling and a list of identity. Like it's just an identity at that point that you can roll other things in at any given time. At one point, I feel like the deficit was rolled into this.
Yes, it was. But again, the deficit was rolled into it as a way to pretend like, Christians are frugal. Christians know how to take care of their money. And if the government doesn't know how to take care of money, then that means that God does, God's not with us. And we need to make sure that we're not being wasteful on those people who need stuff because they're not really working that hard. They should be working, so it's all of a piece, right? And it can be very hard on the outside to see this, but I think it's really important to understand that even in the case of Bob Jones, when do they get their tax exempt status back? Early 2000s, I believe it's 2001, 2002. So, this is how long this thing lasts. And that's really important to understand that people dig their heels in. They don't want to do this. And you might say, well, that's really crazy. Why would they want to be that way? Well, because there's not been any penalty for it, as we can see through the Trump administration, where they've had, Trump has given them lots of judges and 3 Supreme Court judges. And that plays into what has, traditionally been a part of the Republican Party, this conservatism. But now I would say that what has happened is that I used to say that the evangelicals were embedded in the Republican Party, but now I think Republicans are now embedded in evangelicalism, and they're working for them instead of working for the party in certain kinds of ways that, people in the past would have thought, like Buckley and others would have thought what, conservatism really looked like.
Yeah, I'm going to take a bit of a pivot here just because Q is on my mind. I just watched that HBO documentary. I just wanted to ask you what you think about the overlap with the QAnon movement. Because there's a lot of similarities, even though ostensibly the goals of QAnon don't entirely overlap with what, religious texts have to offer.
Yeah, I think the thing about Q is that what Q plays into is something very important about evangelicals, which is there's always a sense of fatalism, of fear, of that things are going to come crashing down and that they have to be the ones culturally to uphold the nation, and that at any moment we're going to be destroyed from inside by certain kinds of forces. And so I think this is what's been very attractive for evangelicals about Q. And I think what's also important about this is that whether you think about it like Q or Christian nationalism or whatever, there's these tangents that are religiously inflected in evangelicalism about biblical belief that sort of help evangelicals take an easier road into something like Q, or the kinds of nationalism things that we saw on January 6th about, like, praying in the Capitol and all of this stuff, that God wants to bring something new. And Q really plays into a lot of that kind of conspiracy theory thinking slash, this is the end times, what are we going to do? And also, and never discount this, the ways in which evangelicals think about themselves as a persecuted minority.
It just basically trains the mind, right? To have that sort of the shape of your thoughts. Q fits right into that construct.
Yeah.
I mean, so what? I mean, if the Republican Party is now beholden to this, I mean, we're almost at the point where it's not. It's not even beholden. It's just become one thing at this point. Where and it really is, it feels like a modality of thought, because you don't hear anything about the deficit anymore. It doesn't have any resonance. I mean, it's guns is still, like, seems to me to be a religious tenet almost. At one point it was, that the ACA was too long, and that was un-American, and that was un-Christian on some level. These things all get blended in. What, like, has it broken? Like, what is, like, when, I mean, has the fever broken, but I mean, has the mechanism broken? Like, at one point it doesn't have more to consume, and it starts to consume itself.
I think we're at the consume itself stage, because I think that there's nothing to talk about. I will say, you brought up the deficit. I think the only way they talk about the deficit now is that we're spending too much money to get rid of coronavirus, which they don't believe in the first place, right?
Right.
So,
and vaccinations. I mean, this whole
vaccinations
thing.
now.
Like,
but I mean, for you're like going, I don't understand. And I'm going, well, it's because they don't like to think about science. Science is not, the end all be all. It's God's going to take care of us, right? But God is not going to help you breathe when they stick that, that ventilator inside of you. If you go get the vaccine, that's a lot easier than spending all this time in the hospital and maybe seeing your loved one die, unfortunately. And I think that this way in which, the Republican Party has left off all of the things they would have been caring about, fiscal conservatism, limited government, all of this stuff. They didn't have any complaints when it was Trump doing this, when he ran up the deficit, right? But the moment it happens with somebody else, they do. But at the same time, they're besieged and beset by all of the conspiracy theories they've got to deal with right now, right? So it's about, we're not going to wear masks, or Republican governors letting this go, or that, January 6th wasn't as bad as it was, or, any of the myriad other things like immigration and all of these issues, which all have some, I would say, linkage to what evangelicals believe, right? But now they have become so hardened that they can't move out of these, really extreme positions that they are in. So this is where I think we're at a very critical stage, because these, positions have made them not to be able to move. And then secondarily also have put them in a space where everything they say now sounds more like religion than it does about a political stance.
So, I mean, if the Republicans, so this is, I mean, from my perspective, like the Republicans can't even sort of muster up. So they went through the same thing with the deficit, right? I mean, that was like ostensibly like their theology, and they completely threw it over. And it really just sort of laid bare the fact that it was never really, they never really believed that theology. It was really more just signifying. And now they can't pivot back to it. I mean, like they tried to, even when they were talking about the relief bill, it was, well, I mean, they didn't say anything about the deficit, really. I mean, it was just like, this is too big, and it's unnecessary. And then even when they talk about the infrastructure bill, they're not even talking about it in terms of the deficit. They're saying they're haggling over the word infrastructure, and they're just deploying like wish list. But I guess my point is that they broke their, whatever it was, they're signifying. They broke it. It's just like it was a veneer that has shattered, and they don't seem to be able to sort of like glue it back together. Did Trump do that to evangelicals, like in terms of their morality in some level?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he in a way he pushed them to the point where they had to accept everything to accept him. Do you see what I'm saying? And so in that sense, yes, he broke it. But I think it was already broken because they were at the point, and I think the crucial point is 2015 when same-sex marriage becomes the law of the land. I mean, I'm forgetting my years. I might have the year wrong. But when Obergefell happens, it's basically a moment where they're like, we just lost the biggest thing we could lose. You know, now gays can get married. What are we going to do? How do we get this back? And so I think the prize has always been at the end, can we get rid of Roe versus Wade? And so it became important to get those judges and to get that in place so that that could fall. That was the, you know, we couldn't stop this, but we can stop this. And we can stop this by getting the judges. And so, yes, he broke them in a way. But I think the whole thing is broken because the ways in which both the Republican Party and evangelicals have acted is that the theologies have hardened or the beliefs have hardened so much to where they're now, you know, you could almost call them fundamentalists in a way because they can't come off of any other line. It's all about, you know, this is what we believe and that's it. It's sort of like, you know, Mitch McConnell saying corporate people need to stay out of politics about the, you know, voting, right? But I'm like, dude, they give you money. Why are you talking to them like this? And he tried to backtrack it a little bit. But at the same time, he had to realize that his hard line about no, 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 no has backed them into a corner where they can't do anything else.
And I guess, I mean, the veneer that I'm thinking about in terms of being broken is really one is on the perception side that like there has been a privileging of evangelical thought that existed for a long time. I mean, people forget this, but Hillary Clinton back in the early aughts was like, we need to maybe move a couple of steps in the direction of evangelicals when it comes to abortion, for instance, because they have real heartfelt beliefs and et cetera, et cetera. And they obviously have morality on their side, et cetera, et cetera. And it feels like nobody actually buys that anymore of the people who would have 25 years ago, let's say. And that is the, and that's the veneer I'm talking about being shattered. It's no longer, nobody believes it anymore. You know, whether they believe it anymore, the evangelicals believe it or not is irrelevant as much as nobody believes that they believe it anymore.
Exactly. And that's part of what I was trying to get them to see with this book is that people believe some things about you. And one of those big things is racism. And here's the history of that. And as much as you like to say that this is not you, this is you, you know, or the thing that everybody says on Twitter, this you, right? And it's sort of like, yeah, nobody believes them anymore because we've seen all the things, whether you want to bring it down to a basic level to talk about, you know, the people who have failed like Jerry Falwell Jr. or Ted Haggard or any of that stuff. We know that they weren't holding up morality, right? I mean, and so there's one way to look at it, but there's the other ways in which, you know, Franklin Graham has spoken about whether that was Obama or, you know, denigrated other people and denigrated Black Lives Matter and denigrated all of these things. We know that it's not just about rhetoric, it's about their belief. And we know that they don't believe the things that they've told us that they believe because they don't uphold them themselves. So why should we believe them? And why should we take them at their word about anything? And so maybe the bigger thing that I think you're signaling to here is that we've all been caught up in this way in which evangelicals have, you know, sort of, I would say, trained all of us in the media and in scholarship and everything else to think about them as moral actors, when the reality is that they are not moral actors. They are actors who want power and use morality to get it.
Well, or the appearance of morality.
Or the appearance of morality.
Go on, Sam.
Yeah. Well, where does this head? Like where, I mean, I know this is probably outside your portfolio as a historian, but where does this lead 10, 15, 20 years down the road? I mean, if we were talking contemporaneously at the time that like, hey, they're starting this moral majority, you know, in the 70s, and they're fighting this, and they're starting to make a case of abortion, we could have maybe made some prediction about where this is going to lead. But it sort of feels like we're at the end of that epoch. And so the question becomes, what does the next epoch look like?
That's a good question. I think there's two ways. One is that this collapses because of age and demographics. That could be one way, and that this does not become the power group that we think it's going to be. Or B, which is the more frightening aspect, is that depending on what happens in 2022 and 2024 elections, that there's even increased hardening, and then we move into this kind of, neo-fascist kind of state that is, run by, religious actors, right? And circumscribed by that. I mean, I think we're at an interesting moment where I don't know how it's going to go. I'll be honest with you, but it could go either one of these two ways. And I think that that's really important to think about, because I think, I'll say this, January 6th was the biggest warning bell that this country could ever get. And in part because what people didn't see about January 6th is that it was supported by churches long before January the 6th. There were lots of churches talking about there were going to be a reckoning. And if you think about the lies that were told about the election, the lies that were told about Biden's win, and that Donald Trump had really won, and how readily people believed that, and how churches primed people to be ready to take over on January the 6th, I am not sure that that won't happen again. Because we have these kinds of religious actors and people who feel that they're very patriotic in certain kinds of ways that none of us who believe in this nation would think are patriotic, will do this kind of activity again because they have religious fervor.
I just want to remind everybody, the most powerful theocrat in the history of the United States in terms of where they attained elected office was a guy named Mike Pence.
Yes.
Anthea Butler, the book is White Evangelical Racism, The Politics of Morality in America. Thanks so much for your time today. We'll put a link to that at majority.fm. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Sam. Thank you, Emma.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back. We'll wrap this thing up. Well, let's go right into it. I didn't hear any of that, the break sound, so that's okay. It is, it's interesting to contemplate where we'll be in 15, 20 years with this, but, people should keep in mind that the Republicans have a structural advantage in these elections, both from a congressional standpoint because of gerrymandering and the gerrymandering that will go forward because of the way that the state legislatures went in 2020. And there is obviously a structural advantage in terms of the Senate because smaller states, they have more representation. Emma likes to cite this multiple times a week, as I do. 40 million more people represented.
Dig?
Huh?
Is
No,
that
no,
a dig?
no, no,
Okay.
no. It's just, it's an important thing to remind people. 40 million more voters voted for the Democrats in the Senate than the Republicans, yet it's 50-50. So it is, we could very well be at an inflection point. And so tune in 5 years and we will let you know how it's going. But also, we'll also hope you tune in tomorrow, right?
Please do.
All right,
See you
folks.
then.
See you then. And for those of you hanging around,
I really
Nomi's
want-
going to be joining us.
Oh, yeah. I really wanted to ask her too, just about like those Gallup numbers about declining religiosity over, it's just this steep decline over since the 2000s started. But, we didn't have enough time. It was just a fascinating topic.
There's also a lot of data about really how much self-identified evangelicals actually go to church, which is not as high as you would think.
Yeah.
Frankly. I mean, it is in many respects and that data about religiosity is in part about church going. That specific figure about it, like having. Well, look who's back. Nomi is back from vacation.
I am.
Hello.
Hi. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Good. How you doing?
I'm feeling wonderful. I'm feeling rested and cleansed. I got sick on vacation, so I feel
Oh, congratulations.
Yes, it's a rite of
Cleansed.
passage. Yes, not intentionally so.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
wow.
think
All right.
you revealed the kind of sickness that you may have had.
Yes.
But
Yeah, that was pretty explicit.
I thought I was very chill about it.
So Naomi, what's on your show today?
On our show today, the timing of this could not be better. So we have our panel today is Simon Narode and Lauren Ashcraft, who ran for Congress in New York against Carolyn Maloney this last cycle in New York City. But she is launching a new show. And then before that, we have a great conversation about Amazon and their distribution program, like the impact it has on the shipping, how logistics, how it affects the world, the cost it has on the environment, the cost it has on people. The author is Jake Wilson. He wrote a book called The Cost of Free Shipping, Amazon and the Global Economy. So that is the show today at 3 p.m. Eastern on YouTube /The Nomi Key Show and on Twitch /the_Nomi Key_ show. And of course on Patreon.
You really got that down now.
Did I do it? Did I get it?
The underscore stuff just rolls off the tongue. It's because you're probably so cleansed. I should remind you, folks, that this show relies on your support. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, you not only get the free show, but you get it free of commercials, and then you get the fun half. It is your support that keeps this show going. Also, don't forget justcoffee.coop, fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code majority, get 10% off. Check in our podcast description and YouTube description for any of those links on the deals that you might get from our sponsors today. And, Matt is not with us today. He has gotten his first shot, right?
I think that is the reason, right? That he's getting it today.
Well, check out Left Reckoning, folks.
Sorry for the HIPAA
find
violation.
It on YouTube.
Matt.
What's that?
You don't have to follow that. You're not a doctor.
Sorry for the HIPAA violation.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that.
I think if you're a medical
employee. We're speculating. All right. Let's take a quick break. Head into the fun half. Number is 646-257-3920. I'm not sure we'll have time for calls today, but if you want to take the risk, it's up to you, folks. See you in the fun half. All right, let's jump right in it. We got music issues. That happens. That's okay. Well, Emma didn't come back from the break. She expected it to be longer. Nomi, you're okay. You're off.
I'm here. Yeah.
A fun time to come back to work with everything that just went down in Minneapolis on top of the Chauvin trial. But what did you miss last week? Anything?
I missed the Amazon vote. We're going to talk about that today quite a bit. What else did we miss? I don't know. You're supposed to tell me. I had these. Go ahead.
What is your sense of the Amazon vote? I mean, I've read multiple assessments of it. Jane McAlevey has one in The Nation. I think we're going to try and bring on a couple of people on Thursday about this. But there's competing assessments of why the union lost in such a big way in Bessemer.
So, and this is all based on conversations, I wouldn't share off the record conversations, but some just private conversations with people who are involved in union organizing and were there and otherwise. So it's not my personal, it's just like sort of the best analysis I heard.
Right.
But I think, number one, all good organizers know you start with low hanging fruit. It builds morality. It builds The model morale, exactly. Thank you. This is what I'm talking about. I'm fried. My brain. I didn't eat for 3 days. Like, we'll see how the show goes today. Builds morale. And so I think there was a question, maybe not as public, but a conversation about why Bessemer first, a place where there isn't there is a legacy of organizing, but it's nowhere near. It's a right to work state. The challenges are just going to be much more difficult, and there are plenty of Amazon facilities where people are organizing right now all over the country where it might have been a little bit easier. And I think with RWDSU, which is the president's based in New York, Stuart Applebaum, I think there was a natural kind of look to maybe somewhere like Staten Island, where even though Staten Island is Republican, like everybody in Staten Island is a member of a union, even the Republican Senate members, or the Democrats that caucus with Republicans, I should say, they weren't challenged in the IDC because they were so close to unions. So I think the first question is, could there have been a fight that was more winnable? And then that could have been broadened out to other places around the country. I think the second question is just, there were some reports that came out like the last couple of days about how many people signed the union card, and it was not very high. And that was, I think there was a lot of, go ahead.
Yeah, just to explain to people what you're talking about with this, so that people understand. There, you have a unit at your workplace, and how that's defined, it may be basically a function of either your titles or your roles at work, right? Like where in this department, I'm making this up because I don't know what it would break down at Amazon, but where we grab stuff off the shelves as opposed to being the drivers, let's say. And in this unit, when they started with the cards, first off, they didn't get an incredibly high percentage. I think we only got like 35% to begin with. And then the size of the unit expanded, in part because Amazon started hiring new people in there. So what started off at something like 1,500 or 3,000 became a 6,000 person unit. So the percentage of people who had filed cards was even smaller, which made it that much more challenging to win a vote.
And the question is, well, if they knew that, why have the vote then?
Right.
And I think a lot of the other labor leaders that came down, this is secondhand conversation here, were a little surprised on the day of to learn how many union cards were actually signed, because if you can't even get to half before the vote, you're definitely not winning. It was incredibly clear. There was no way. And so why even half the vote? And I think there's a couple of strategic questions about why vote, why Bessemer, why not somewhere else first? And I'm sure there's a lot of other, questions about, because listen, everybody came in solidarity. There was, how often do you see labor leaders from other unions?
Well, the president of the United States, gave probably the most full-throated support for a union drive that we've seen in the history of the United States. I mean, it's worth what it's worth, but that is the reality of it. I mean, so, if, I think it's something we're going to revisit. Same time, I mean, the irony is today we had the tech people at New York Times declare that they had trying to unionize, and the Brookings Institute trying to unionize.
I love this so much. Wait, but who in Brookings Institute is unionizing? And can we take it to the Heritage Foundation? I'm so curious.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Apparently, and this is breaking, Biden is going to announce withdrawal of U.S. troops from Afghanistan by September 11th.
Yeah.
Well,
it's 2,500 troops that we still have there.
We'll see if he sticks to it. I mean,
we'll see if he sticks to it.
We have heard this many times.
Don't worry, guys. There's private contractors that'll fill in for them.
It's private contractors. They'll be, NATO's still going to have a presence there.
Oh, I know that guy. Don't worry. The commander of
Right,
NATO.
of course. Well, of course, from what I understand.
Sorry, I'm going to give you a little bit of secret information.
No, you don't just know it. You are commanding it, obviously.
I'm commanding.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Right now from my phone.
But that's good news, because it wasn't just a question of like, are we just going to leave 2,500 there? You know, if they were going to stay, it's going to be like, we're going to surge, and all we need is 6 more months. And that's it. I mean,
why did he pick 9/11 as the date to withdraw? It's just like, seems like a little bit, it's like, it seems a little odd. I mean, it's just a weird way to mark it. I mean,
it's intentional, but it's like kind of like, unless they do some sort of, because wait,
morbid.
It's the 20th anniversary. It's the 20th anniversary of 9/11 this year.
I know, and meeting that deadline is not something that we should be, I guess, celebrating. I just find the seems like a misstep, but whatever.
Yeah. I don't know if they focus group that one.
Yeah, it's an odd sort of like specificity, right?
I mean, it was clearly meant to be symbolic in some way, but I don't even know what symbolism that would provide except extreme darkness.
Well, look, it only took us 20 years to essentially, get back to where we were about 19 years ago. That's basically what the answer is on that, I think.
Maybe it's just an opportunity because Biden on the 20th, anniversary will give some 9/11 commemoration ceremony, and he'll do a big speech that says now we're all out. But again, that doesn't make it any better.
Yeah, I mean, who knows? I mean, I guess if it's very hard for me to imagine Joe Biden taking this opportunity to say the past 20 years have been a wretched, horrible mistake. And it has cost the lives of hundreds upon hundreds of thousands of people, if not millions of people. And we are really in no more of an advantageous position than we were then. The only thing that's happened is a lot of arms makers have made a ton of money, and we have managed to destabilize all different types of areas in the region, particularly in the Middle East. And so we're going to completely reorient ourselves. And then, of course, the next word he'll say is like, and we're going to put everything we got on the border of China.
Yeah. We're replacing drones with soldiers with drones. That's basically it. We've upped our investment.
So Tucker Carlson got some support from, is it Lachlan Murdoch? Yes. Is it Lachlan? Yeah. And
which Succession character is he supposed to be?
He's the I think the older brother, that's a good question. I'm not sure which one. Maybe he's the heir apparent, although I think the other one was, but he didn't want anything to do with Fox, apparently.
Which
Fox
is the
News.
one? Yeah, that's the one. James Murdoch is the one that's married to the environmental person.
Right. I think he was like, it's too uncomfortable for me to get involved in that. So Tucker Carlson basically mainstreamed the replacement theory the other day, which is a white supremacist theory that immigrants are coming in to replace white people. And here he now doubles down and justifies it. There is a whole host of lies associated with this, right? I mean, first off, that range from, it is a mistake to presume if the Democrats were to presume this, that having an influx of folks from Central America are going to necessarily end up Democratic voters. There's a lot of evidence that that's not actually the case. From a cultural standpoint, many tend to be more conservative in some respects. Certainly, George W. Bush didn't think that this demographic wave was necessarily disadvantageous to Republicans. Neither did Ronald Reagan. But Tucker Carlson has to reduce this to simply an electoral issue, because otherwise people would start to ask, hey, wait a second, Why do you have a problem with brown people as opposed to white people? Here he is sort of shifting off of the replacement theory and trying to make it more about electoral politics. No sound. We have no sound.
I got to rejoin the call, but something's going on.
Okay. All right. We'll get back to that in a minute. Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 702 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. Hey, Emma. Hey, Nomiki. It's Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas.
Bro Flamingo from Las Vegas. How are you?
I'm all right. I think this is the first time I've ever been on the phone with Nomiki. Big fan.
Oh, thank you. Hello.
What's up, Bro Flamingo?
But hey, Emma. I really liked your guest today. I think it was really pertinent to everything that's been going on. You know, with the Christian nationalism, with the murder of Dante Wright in Minneapolis. I know when I call in, I usually, talk about like the same thing, but I feel like in the context of leftism in America, for us to make any progress, white supremacy has to be defeated. And like Anthea Butler was talking about, Christian nationalism is a core tenet of that. And, and these themes and ideas. And I think you guys had a really good conversation, but I feel like at least right now, they're like, we're coming to I think at least a true reckoning of how white supremacy and these Christian nationalism and these pernicious ideologies really permeate our culture. And I like how she tied the riot at the Capitol to, how the Christian churches don't have this fatalistic idea that, the end times and we need to take action, whatever. And I think the Q conspiracies fit just right in. I like how Emma brought that up, where the Q conspiracies just fit right into that. And of course, as everybody knows, when you have the evangelical conspiracies and the Q conspiracies, it's about the Jews, they're controlling the blacks, and the Great Replacement theory, how Tucker is going on about that. I think basically, I'm sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I think there's just so many things that are tied to the pernicious ideology of white supremacy that, of course, we have to work on labor, we have to work on the environment, we have to work on the gay, trans rights, and, and racism in America. But I think that core ideology has to be defeated, and it has to be tackled if we're going to have any type of multiracial labor coalition and any type of, just leftist progress in this country. Because it just seems to be like every time you go down the rabbit hole of any of these issues, it's just white supremacy at this core of this country. I love what you guys do. Really good conversation. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts on this, and take care.
All right, thanks. I think the central sort of like organizing force in American politics has been white supremacy. I mean, it is, you see it throughout our history. There's been times where it's forefronted and times when it's not forefronted, but I mean, it has always been there. And I am increasingly of the mind that, like, I don't know if you can fight the ideology. I mean, as much as, stave it off and let attrition happen, frankly. And in the meantime, also fight the mechanisms, the specific mechanisms in our society that that are used in service of that ideology, right? So, like, does that make sense?
Yes, but also one more thing, Sam, because I agree with you, because I think it's not like so clear cut. But the one thing I've been thinking about, right? I know this may sound crazy, but like, what about like a denazification program similar to something like in Germany? I know it's not a 1-to-1, right? But I do feel like through Obama, through in the 90s, like through the 90s and Reagan's, at the minimum, the government has been hands off with these guys a lot. I mean, you remember them. I mean, I'm old enough to remember the militia groups and all those guys running around in the backwoods, just being white supremacist crash dummies, and Reagan giving a nod and a wink, and I think there has to be some type of program or institution where it's just like, I know it sounds crazy, like, oh my God, government overreach, Pro Flamingos advocating for it, but there's got to be something, because at the end of the day, I mean, on some level, right, it's not this binary, but white supremacy is just stopping things like things on climate change, because some white guys are agreed about cancel culture. We can't make it.
But what's going to be easier to tackle, though, right? I mean, what's going to be? I mean, if if you could, let me put it this way: if you can get to the point where there is a government-sponsored program to supremacize white people, you've already passed the Green New Deal. I just think that in terms of I think you've passed the Green New Deal. You have passed a massive reparation bill. You have passed Medicare for all. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It's just that in terms of like the sequencing, that I just don't think that we have a society that can get to that point. That's why I'm saying, like, I think you knock off certain mechanical things that empower and extend white supremacy. You take those off the table, one at a time if you have to. But the idea that you're going to get rid of that ideology just like that, I think is not happening. But go ahead.
We can't even get Democrats to hold the police force accountable in multiple cities across this country where there's active white supremacy being organized internally, and the only person overseeing the police force is a Democratic, supposedly progressive in New York, for instance, mayor. So like, that's what I'm looking at. I'm like, what is the question? What was it that pushed Johnson, like really internally conversations? Let's go back to the archives and like read the transcripts that pushed Johnson when he had those conversations to sign the Civil Rights Act, because that's the kind of like, there's a holdup there. And what will it take for our supposed allies to make simple moves, should be simple moves that have astounding effects on society?
Appreciate the call. All right, go ahead.
Wait, Sam. One thing. I'll jump and you can answer when I get off. Also, Sam, because you got you and Anthea and everybody were talking about how much of this is a function of age, meaning when this generation just kind of dies away naturally, how much change do you think what would happen? When will be the pace of change, or at least like the resistance? Will this hardened resistance of white supremacy die off? Take care, guys. Love you. Love this best.
I mean, I increasingly think that that generational change, and not generic generational change, but the generational change we are experiencing right now, where you have a generation the size of the millennials that is as large as the boomers, that this is going to be really huge. Do I think it's going to wipe out racism? No, but I do think that we're already seeing it. We're already seeing huge leaps, I think, in our society, just in, the past, 20, 30 years. Like I think I told the story the other day. I was watching Ghostbusters with Saul. And aside from, and also, in terms of a generational change, the Bill Murray character coming off as super rapey during the whole thing. There was a scene where the mayor had, the city was getting attacked by all these ghosts. And so the mayor assembled everybody important in the city to, sort of like all hands on deck. And there's all white guys. There's no women in the room, and the only black guy in the room is the fourth Ghostbuster that they brought in. I can't even remember his name. I can't remember any of the character's name, but and I was like, oh my God, I felt embarrassed to show my kid this. And
it's New York, right? Like, it's supposed to be New York, which at that time was extraordinarily
It's New York. And this was, the idea that like, it's all just white guys, old white guys.
That's what Sex in the City was. I mean, like, that's what Sex in the City was. I mean, I know you're a star of that, Sam, but my point is that was later and so was Friends. These were shows that were later, and everyone in this New York is all white, except like in season 7 or something when
you
Miranda
have to
dates
like
that
to
black
live
guy.
that life in New York, Emma,
Yeah.
as you know so well. You like literally have to be basically a Wall Street trader that only hangs out with other like Wall Street traders. It's impossible to be in an only white anything in New York.
And
Yes.
the point being that I think like there's been a big leap from, over the past 20 years. And I think that is a function of like just a new and sizable generation. So I think we're about to make a big leap, and I think we're going to see that in our politics. And I think we're going to see that in our race relations. I don't think it's going to end all be all, but I mean, I do think that is coming now.
So Tucker Carlson is right.
It could go sideways too. Well, I mean, he's saying that, do we have the sound? Let's do this on Tucker Carlson. The Tucker Carlson is worried about, is trying to come back for a second bite at the apple about the replacement theory. And he's now trying to sort of present it in such a way, he's sort of backing off. He's not explicitly backing off, but he's trying to make it like it's not about the fact that, these dirty, smelly people are coming, I think he said in the past, and they're going to, just make it dirty, make our country dirty. It is now he's making it like it's specifically an electoral argument, and he's trying to demonize the Democrats as opposed to making it sound like he's got an issue with non-white people coming in.
So it's a political question, obviously. At least one prediction came true right away. All those little gatekeepers on Twitter did become hysterical. They spent the last 4 days jumping up and down, furiously trying once again to pull the show off the air.
Pause it for 1 second.
Once again, they will.
The definition of gatekeeper is embedded in the term gatekeeper. That means you control the gate. You control who gets in. And Tucker Carlson is already in. He has passed the gate. In fact, he is living in one of the castles. And I mean that in every aspect of his life. He is sitting in the seat of a studio. Well, he's not in a studio, I think. But Fox News is one of the biggest cable news outlets that exists, if not the biggest. He has at least 3 homes. He is an heir to millions upon millions of dollars. He himself is already a millionaire.
His show's the highest rated on Fox News and in the country in terms of cable news as of right now.
Went to private school. Let's just keep going.
Right. Yeah. He doesn't have to worry. They're not gatekeepers on Twitter. There are people on Twitter who are exclaiming, hey, this guy who is sitting on the top of the castle, who is in the gate, is pushing blatant white supremacist ideology. Just to clarify. Go ahead.
Though it is amusing to see them keep at it, they get so enraged. It's a riot. But why all the anger? If someone says something you think is wrong, is your first instinct to hurt them? Probably not. Normal people don't respond that way. If you hear something you think is incorrect, you try to correct it. But getting the facts right is hardly the point of this exercise. The point is to prevent unauthorized conversations from starting in the first place. Shut up, racist! No more questions! You've heard that before.
Pause
I wonder
it.
how much longer
Pause
they
it.
imagine Americans are going to go.
Pause it.
Why have they heard that before?
It's odd that he is so confident that his audience has heard that before. Interesting. That's interesting.
Says more
Shut
about
up, racist.
them than just than society as a whole.
Well,
but
They keep being called a rapist.
Tucker
I don't know why.
Tucker
Yeah, don't you
knows
get
his
it?
audience. Let's be clear here. This is really important because there's a lot of people who go on to his show. Tucker knows his audience. Tucker's making clear who his audience is. His audience has heard "shut up, racist" quite a bit. So now everybody knows what Tucker knows, who his audience is. Continue.
point is to prevent unauthorized conversations from starting in the first place. Shut up, racist! No more questions! You've heard that before. You wonder how much longer they imagine Americans are going to go along with this. An entire country forced to lie about everything all the time. It can't go on forever, but you can see why they're trying it. Demographic change is the key to the Democratic Party's political ambitions. Let's say that again for emphasis because it is the secret to the entire immigration debate. Demographic change is the key to the Democratic Party's political ambitions. In order to win and maintain power, Democrats plan to change the population of the country. They're no longer trying to win you over with their program. They're obviously not trying to improve
for 1
your
second.
life.
Now, just anybody who pays attention to politics knows that this is incredible projection. The Republican Party holds a 50-50 tie in the Senate with 40 million less votes. The Republican Party controls the state legislatures of Wisconsin, of Pennsylvania, of multiple other states with an exact same dynamic. Not necessarily 40 million votes, but they control these legislatures, even though more people have voted for Democrats. The Republican Party has started an unprecedented, except for unless you go back to Jim Crow, attack on voting rights, trying to shape the electorate. So let's be clear on who is actively trying to shape the electorate. Democrats are not trying to shape the electorate by saying that we're going to give a path to citizenship for people 8 to 10 years from now.
I have a theory, Sam. When Hillary Clinton decided to intervene in Honduras, it was really about disrupting the political state there so that we'd have the Democrats could fund the migrant crisis so we could have millions and millions of people here to vote. That's what this was about.
Yeah, what about the Republicans' war on drugs, right? Like, were they deep state actors or secret Democrats who were trying to cause more unrest in South America?
Lincoln Democrats.
There we go. And just quickly, Sam, before you say this, like, Biden has a funny way of showing that he's trying to change the demographics of the United States. If this was really the reality, he'd get rid of that Title 42 provision that basically blocks all people seeking asylum except for children from coming into the United States amid COVID, and he hasn't done that.
If Tucker Carlson's really concerned about this, he can advocate for tens of millions of dollars, really billions of dollars, being spent in those countries in Central America to build some semblance of a society that provides opportunity and safety for people there, and they will not leave those countries as refugees. Let's hear Tucker continue on. I'm sure that's coming up next.
Change the population of the country. They're no longer trying to win you over with their program. They're obviously not trying to improve your life. They don't even really care about your vote anymore. Their goal is to make you irrelevant. That is provably true. And because it's true, it drives them absolutely crazy when you say it out loud. A hurt dog barks. They scream about how noting the obvious is immoral. You're a racist if you dare to repeat things that they themselves proudly say. Most people go along with this absurd standard. They dutifully shut up. They don't think they have a choice. But no matter what they're allowed to say in public, everyone understands the truth. When you change who votes, you change who wins. That fact has nothing inherently to do with race or nationality. It's the nature of democracy. It is always true. You can watch it happen. You probably have. All across the country, we have seen huge changes in election outcomes caused by demographic change.
I mean, you see where he's trying to shift this off, right? He's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He's trying to come off of the fact that it was a racist rant the other night, and now he's trying to make it about just simply math. But the underlying assumptions in and of themselves are racist, and all he's done is pivot to some type of basically conspiracy theory and it is true that as demographics change, voting outcomes change. Of course, age, race, ethnicity, all of these things play, religion, all of them play into voting. So what? He is trying to mobilize his white supremacist followers and tell them that it's, the Democrats are essentially playing the role of the Jews in his little scenario, right? Which is they're pulling the strings. They don't care about you. What? They don't. What does that mean? You? Who's the you there? It's white people.
The guy in his
like,
bunker.
it's so obvious what he's doing.
No, the followers that have all collectively understood the experience of what it's been like to be called racist repeatedly. And, obviously that can't be the reality. That's got to be them being persecuted. Everyone else is wrong. We're the correct in-group. We're the righteous. Bringing it back to the evangelical conversation from the first hour. That's what they see themselves as the righteous select few who are barricading the castle walls as the end times come in. That's their perspective.
I'm glad we were gatekeeping and kept Tucker from being able to say what he said.
They're the gatekeepers, I guess, honestly. I'm mixing too many metaphors and I've lost my mind.
The white nationalists on VDare apparently praised Tucker. That was nice of them to do. At the very least, they're listening. So
they interviewed or John Oliver interviewed one, like a former white supremacist that basically said it was standard viewing for his white supremacist family and the other people he associated with. And they'd watch him once and then watch the rerun to take notes.
I'm sure Tucker would be shocked to hear that.
First for enjoyment, and then second to learn. And so that is exactly how he's viewed. They're never going to say it out loud, but
it's also what Donald Trump would do every day. The only person Donald Trump ended up listening to in the final moments.
This was a funny moment. Apparently Jesse Water had a child. Congratulations to him. And
was that with the intern that he had the affair with?
Oh, is that right?
Thank you. I was like, someone's got to say it.
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't follow that. Oh, well, good for him.
Love is love. You can't judge. You don't know what's going on in people's situations. It's just also a workplace violation.
But this is, at Fox. Are you kidding?
No, he got promoted.
I would imagine.
She had to lose her job, naturally.
Of course.
And he took a vacation for 2 weeks.
What's interesting about this is a classic right-wing sort of a moment of revelation. When they experience something, they all of a sudden, it's like a revelation to them. Like, oh my gosh, now I finally see. Just contemplate what Jesse Waters' perspective has been on paternity leave in the past. And here he is coming back, realizing on second thought.
I think it's safe to say I'm the only one on the show that's been peed on twice today.
No, not true.
And, well, maybe not Gutfeld. Yes. The night's young for Greg. But my father said just today, Jesse, you better get back on the 5 pretty soon. Your replacements have been really good. I was like, thanks, Dad. But now I'm pro paternity. I used to mock people for taking paternity. I used to think it was a big ruse, but now I wish I could take 6 weeks, but I don't know. Apparently, I have people nipping at my heels, so I gotta be back.
Look at him.
One thing
you
I know.
Have the baby to take 6 months.
One thing.
He loves citing his parents, like reading his mom's texts. My dad saying this, just a little.
They're like union people. It's crazy. That's the weird thing about this is he came from. It just basically is like everybody at Fox for the most part. This is not his background. His parents are like teachers.
Well,
kudos to them for maintaining the relationship with him, to be honest.
But the bottom line is, here's a guy who experiences something and it's a complete, he thinks it's a complete sham until he experiences it. This is you can't get any more sort of fundamentally right-wing than this idea of I thought it was all BS until I experienced it. And now I believe it's real. the idea that my experience, my soul experience, is the only experience that has any validity. I mean, this is.
To be fair, they're rewarding men. Like,
what's that?
There's a loophole here. It's paternity leave. So on one hand, you could be seen as a weak man, not being able to like show up to work the next day. But on the other hand, it's time off for a man. So there's a little misogyny there too. I don't know. I don't think it's entirely because it's. I mean, I get it with Meghan McCain, like she flipped and reversed her positioning on it. But
I was about to say that's the number one parallel here, right? Is
Yeah.
She was now in favor of parental leave all of a sudden.
I don't know if she was ever against it. I feel like Meghan McCain's just always been this like whatever my dad says. And sometimes her dad used to say things that socially were more acceptable. I don't know. I don't buy it with Jesse Waters. I think he's just like a selfish man who's just like, yeah, paternity leave sounds great. I'll take it. More vacation time, great. Not tying it to the connection societally and.
Well,
and
I don't think he's.
labor
I don't think he's making some type of big ideological turn. But the idea that he thought that people were just like that paternity leave was BS. And now thinks
Paternity
that
leaves for cooks.
now
who wants
wish
to
he-
spend time with their newborn kid.
Yeah, honestly, I mean that's basically it. I mean, this guy, it's just like what was it? Was it Porter from Ohio? One of the Portman from Ohio. Well, when he suddenly became okay with marriage equality when his son came out. I mean, the idea that like that if they don't experience it direct hand, it is immediately dismissed as a phenomenon. I mean, just contemplate what this, if that mentality exists, and it does throughout the right-wing mind, that is.
So what I don't understand about this is he's had like 4 kids already. How is he just figuring this out now?
Well, I don't know. Maybe he didn't take it before. My point, I mean, I doubt if you were to ask Jesse Waters if he had any real like core beliefs or ideology besides, libs suck. If you were to ask him if he's in favor of the government mandating or allowing for paternity leave throughout the country, I would bet he says no. He sees it as an extension of his privilege as a wealthy, well-known Fox personality. And so he's okay with it in that area. But say you're a regular guy, no. Corporations, they've got to milk you for all your worth. Come back and work the next day as soon as your kid is born. That's, I bet, where he'd fall.
Okay, my theory is this. His ex-wife got a bunch of money from him when they divorced. And so now he can't afford a nanny. And so he's waking up at night from the baby. And so now he appreciates it because before there was help. There was
a night nurse. Have you ever heard of a night nurse?
No. What is this?
I've definitely heard of a night nurse. I didn't have one. I would have.
That's
died
the thing
for
that
one, but
rich
yes.
people have. Like I only know it from seeing it on reality TV. But when like,
they
rich,
exist.
Rich people literally have nurses to stay with their kids so they don't have to wake up in the middle of the night and feed them. It's an unbelievable.
That would be hell. That would,
wow.
That would be good.
I'm also not opposed to it.
I mean,
kind of like secretly, like I don't want one.
It sounds nice.
Sounds amazing. I don't have a child and I'm like fantasizing about it.
This is from last Friday, but I want to get to this and then we'll take some phone calls. Ilhan Omar talking, and there are still, my understanding is there's still an ongoing hunger strike in DC to end the blockade on Yemen. Here is Ilhan Omar talking to the media about those protesters.
12 days of a hunger strike is wrong. And everybody can imagine just how much your health and well-being is impacted. And I do hope that those who are watching and seeing realize that the longer that you all are on a hunger strike, the longer that there are people actually dying in Yemen. And so as we think about what it means for somebody to make the decision to go on a hunger strike, to bring attention to a devastation that is happening in Yemen, that we must also allow ourselves to consciously continue to think about the people who are living in that starvation and losing their lives every single day. So thank you all for joining us.
She's just the best we've got. I mean, really, it also adds an additional poignancy given the fact that she was a refugee and she understands the depth of what these kinds of conflicts can cause in the human tragedy and trauma that's just embedded and caused in millions and millions and millions of people. And it's amazing to have her voice in Congress, given that that's her experience, not just as a refugee, but as a Muslim woman and as someone born outside of the country. And it informs her politics, and that's, I think, what makes people so afraid of her, in addition to obviously the xenophobia that's embedded in much of the critique of her.
Let's go to the phones. Calling from a 989 area code. Who's this? 989. 989.
Oh, apologies. Hi, Sam.
Hi, who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Brad from Michigan. Apologies. I was looking for a vaccine, actually.
Find
no,
one?
no luck yet. But I wanted to talk about this new bill that Elizabeth Warren is proposing to. I don't know if you've seen it. It's to set up an anti-racism center at the CDC. I don't remember what I wanted to say though.
Well, that
sorry.
would be a good time for us to say goodbye. I mean, I don't know. I don't know about the bill, but I mean, I think clearly what we have is a problem where there's a tremendous amount of disparity in the way that the vaccines are getting to people. And to a certain extent, the problem is far deeper than the CDC. We see it in New York State, just with all the cuttings of the public hospitals. See it in the way that deaths happen. You see it in. I mean, there's whenever you have an event like this, it is always the most marginalized who suffer the most. And, so dealing with, race at the CDC, I mean, I don't know the specifics of it, but, in terms of the way that the CDC reacts to different outbreaks and whatnot, there's no doubt that, if you are a person if you're Black or a person of color, that the response that you're going to get if you live in a community like that is not going to be on par with the response that less marginalized communities will get. I mean, it's the way that our system is set up. Rube David,
Are they talking about just the distribution of the vaccines or the education around the vaccines? Okay. Because is that even the CDC?
I think it's about health equity outcomes, basically, and that, like, within our public health systems, there's a huge disparity that needs to be addressed on, like, a systemic level.
Rube David, I want to comment to rephrase Mindy's discussion from yesterday. Basically, she's pointing out that even people that are fairly well off in the 100, 350K range are better off financially with a Democratic tax plan versus a Republican one. The Republican plan truly only benefits the extremely rich. Fair enough. Moon in the Lake. Yeah, Tucker knows his audience. He also talks to them like they're 7 years old. Demian, in regards to Yemen, I would highly recommend the documentary Hunger Ward that was just nominated for Academy Award. Best short documentary. It's pretty incredible. Wolf 59. This is the longest story. 2 weeks ago, I cashed a check at a bank, counted before driving away, went to a Walmart to do some business, gave employee the bills, went to the supervisor. They both told me they couldn't accept one of the $100 bills. Showed me how it was phony. Embarrassed, I immediately said I had just gotten it from the bank. She handed the fake bill back to me, told me to take it back to the bank. I did. Arriving about an hour after I'd been there, they almost didn't exchange it because how did they know that bill, it was a bill that they had given me? Thank goodness there were 2 lines full of cars, and the car next to me must have heard and insisted that his money wasn't counterfeit. So they exchanged my bill. Important difference between myself and George Floyd. I'm a 61-year-old white woman. I was shaken like a leaf. Love you all. Vacation. Any thoughts on the downfall of James Charles?
The YouTuber?
I don't know who that is. I
think I may vaguely know. Yeah, he's a YouTuber. I don't really know. I mean, I followed
a
a
political
little bit
YouTuber?
No, makeup.
Oh.
I don't know. Maybe Mila knows more about this stuff because it's like a little, but some like YouTube is so big with younger kids. But I followed a little bit of that David Dobrik stuff, which was pretty disturbing.
Oh, I found
He's
it.
just like he's maybe one of the top 10 YouTubers in the world, and he makes millions and millions of dollars. And basically, he vlogged one of his buddies doing a sexual, like raping a girl.
Oh, wow. Jesus.
And it's geared towards kids, but they dance around it saying, I mean, maybe one of his channels is geared towards kids, but he lost all his sponsorships and YouTube temporarily demonetized.
Temporarily?
It might have been for now. It's temporary, but it took them a long time to demonetize it because he's has this squeaky clean image. He's partnered with like Leo DiCaprio and other people like that, and so they took them a while, but it's still a big controversy. I don't know a ton, but I've listened to a quick podcast.
This one is supposedly about texting with minors. James Charles. There's like 15 caught sexting underage boys.
Yeah,
but as of 4 days ago, I don't know why, they're saying that his corporate sponsors haven't dropped him.
These YouTubers are, it's like the new frontier of celebrity where there's basically no limits on their power. And it's kind of just the way you saw in old Hollywood where people would just, men back then, I mean, you had Judy Garland being drugged or whatever, but they were able to just do whatever they wanted. And I think that's kind of what you're seeing with YouTubers now. It'll shift though, I would imagine.
Train boy. A week after finding out my job would be eliminated, I got diagnosed with cancer. Can I get a shofar for in trying time? Oh, train boy, I'm really, really sorry to hear that. I'm sorry to hear that, man. If there's anything we can do, send an email at to Majority Reporters. Really sorry. Hot, gay, fleshy apparatus. Thanks for today's interview. I feel like I'm in a really helpful office hours session. Pat in Cleveland. Anecdotally, as someone who grew up in a conservative Christian household, I found the cognitive dissonance in my family when it comes to politics and race to be staggering. Great interview as always. Left is best. Rob Gorka. Say the Brooklyn Center cop killed Dante completely by accident, and that cop experiences lifelong trauma because of the accidentally killing someone. She has resigned, incidentally, as of moments ago. Arguably, policing ruins the lives of the citizens as well as the lives of police. I'm sure there's a better way to make that point, but I can't come up with the words. I think in some instances it does. I mean, that's why I say, just eliminate. I mean, start with. I'm not saying this is the entire project, but this is low-hanging fruit as far as I'm concerned. Eliminate traffic stops. No reason for them. No reason for them. They have to be a serious moving violation that you can justify represents a threat to the community, like someone barreling through an intersection and speeding, at 70 miles an hour down the street, or, whatever, 50 miles an hour in a school zone. But none of this, like your registration or your tail light out. You call it in, you give them the license plate, you send them a check, a bill. Boom. You got 10 days to repair it, or you get another ticket. I mean, that's it. If you're just going to issue a ticket, that's it.
Sam, that's part of your point about unburdening the police or framing it like that in order to make it more amenable to conservatives or cops or whatever. It's like a lot of this is responsibility that we've thrust onto police. I don't have sympathy for them, but because of a gutted social welfare state that does not that makes sure that police respond to mental health checks, to domestic disputes, other things that they don't need to be involved in. And even what you're saying, these traffic stops, this should not be a part of policing in this country.
That's how they make their money.
Exactly.
It's not how they make it. That's the crazy part. I was just going to say this. It's not even how that's what they always say. It's how we make our money. No, we're paying our taxes and you're getting, like, you look at the city's budget. It's not coming from traffic tickets.
No, it's not. No, it's not coming from traffic tickets, but the amount of revenue that they bring in also implicates what their budget line is. I mean, there's no doubt about that, right? I mean, they have their quota systems and you eliminate it. You just eliminate that.
And oh, well, you don't get a new bulldozer to go through the streets of like fourth largest city in North Dakota with.
Somebody posted a video of New York City cops have like a robo dog.
We could play that. I mean, I saw Matt retweeted it if we have the video, but
are you effing kidding me?
Juggling a lot. Yeah. Yeah. Well, people can look that up. Matt tweeted it out. They were bringing literally the robo dogs to arrests or to policing, and it's already rolled out here.
Andrew Yang, it's his new mascot too, just so you guys know.
It's very apt.
The robo dog goes up to the churro lady and says, "Get off the street! You're not paying your fine, whatever it is."
How does that guy?
That guy.
What?
How does that guy? That guy's gonna win with that stuff. I mean, it's scary.
He'll win because, well, here's like the turnout is so low in these elections. So 50% haven't decided, but it's still indicative of a serious number of people who've actually consciously thought through, oh yeah, I'll vote for Andrew Yang. These are likely voters. Of the likely voters, the few likely voters that turn out in any citywide election or city election. So it's a turnout game. I mean, it's
nuts.
He's no bueno. He's no bueno.
Vacuous.
Potato. Sam, Mark Maron has won an AMBI award for WTF. Do you worry he'll one day surpass MR's 6 total awards? They just made that award up, AMBI. I mean, doesn't exist in nature. So
an Ambien award?
I don't know what they call it AMBI. I don't know why they call it an AMBI as opposed to an Oscar or something. A square.
Because it
wow.
puts people to sleep.
Lee NYC. Sam, saw your star turn on The Good Fight. Your portrayal of an arrogant Ivy League prick was dead on. Oh, well, thank you. I didn't remember that the guy was an Ivy League guy. I'm not even sure I remember the role per se, but that was a while back. Cruel Angel Thesis. In my religious upbringing, it became evident evangelicals love the book of Revelations above all the rest. So Q fits right in. Also, they have a huge ability to blame victims. Churches have fought against the ADA requirement for wheelchair ramps with the rationale that sickness is a punishment by God. So they dovetail with Republican libertarianism on that thought process. Your left testicle. Profile as pro-life has never actually mattered to evangelicals. I come from that background. While they virtue signal about it, I know for a fact that many of them are quick to visit a clinic when their little girl comes home with an embarrassing news. Saw it a lot. Cruel Angel Thesis. Basically, they eschew Darwin except in social sense. Rabbit from Boston. Hey, Sam and MR crew. I don't know if you're aware, but there's a story that the Boston Globe broke over the weekend about the Patrolmen's Police Union, about how the head of the union, Patrick Rose, has been accused of a half dozen times of child molestation. The union and police department covered it up. Jesus. First accusation, child molestation by Rose, was in 1995 and continued to serve on the force despite the fact after an internal investigation, this accusation was credible and the crime likely took place. I bring this up because I think the police unions really need to be ostracized. If you care about the future of police reform, abolition, and health, greater labor movement, cop unions are toxic. They're essentially all the negative stereotypes about labor unions. If you want one type of police reform, you need to take on unions and their BS. I will check out that Globe story.
Can't read any Globe articles if you don't have a subscription.
Hello, Sam's Tushy. Now that you're fully vaccinated, will you talk to Tim Pool? He needs a spanking. Oh, I guess I should probably reach out. Very possible. Need to figure out the timing on something like that.
You think Tim's gotten his vaccine?
Probably not. He's probably already had COVID, would be my guess.
Good point.
Emma's Posit Fund. What happened to the alpha males into the fun half? Not sure what that refers to. Aaron,
the
song.
the song.
You want to tell him?
Yeah, we gotta just fix it. There's one thing that gets us demonetized in that song. Aaron from Germany. If everyone did a shot, Sam says, every time Sam says, frankly, there'd be about 3,000 alcoholics in a week. All right, fair enough. Frankly, I don't think that's the case. There are other words I would go with, but Chris Burdick, I was sitting on a bus in North Hollywood last night when a drunk driver veered across both lanes, grazed my leg and over my foot. It scared the life out of me, but I'm not too badly banged up. Pending x-ray results. Can I get a pity shofar? Jeez.
God damn.
Wow.
I wonder how he or she knows it was a drunk driver. Probably just a safe assumption, I guess.
Chicago letter carrier says, received Johnson & Johnson vaccine over the weekend. Shout out to the Adams County Health Department in Illinois for all the hard work we do. Can we give him a shofar, please? All right, here's one for both you guys.
Hopefully you're a guy.
What's that?
Hopefully he's a guy, given the news about J&J today. Oof.
What's the news about J&J?
Oh, they're pausing it because 4 women had blood clots, or 6 women had blood clots.
7 million people got the shot.
Yes.
There are 1 in 5,000 women will get a blood clot, I believe, from or less from birth control. I mean, it's good that they're pausing this because people need to have faith in these vaccinations, but 1 in 5,000 people get hit by a car. Like
maybe there's something about the data. I mean, listen, I'm not, but clearly,
I think they're sensitive to it because of the AstraZeneca, and it's really more about like what is the treatment protocol for people if that is a function of that. But it is probably, my guess would be that it is not related to the vaccination at all. That it is just, you're talking about sheer numbers. That's my guess. But I mean, people need to keep this in perspective. Zach Inwa wanted to drop in my 2 cents on Mindy's call from yesterday. Over the last 5 years, I've worked endless overtime and taken trainings with my union to work my way up. The last 2 years, I finally cracked the 6-figure mark. As a kid, I thought this would magically be a tipping point for the perfect movie style life. Instead, I'm saddled with $30K in student debt and rent. And home prices are so high, I'm forced to live 2 hours from the city of Seattle where I have to work. I understand. I mean, the point. I mean, there is economic stress up and down the line. And student debt would go a long way. Relief would go a long way to that. And also taking healthcare off the table. My estimation. Let's take a phone call here. Calling from a 208 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Pat from Seattle.
Pat from Seattle. What's on your mind?
Hey, I'm a tax accountant. I just wanted to respond to Mindy's call yesterday. The SALT deduction doesn't apply to rentals. Just something to keep in mind for her husband.
To rental units?
Really
I mean, or
yeah.
Oh, it doesn't.
So it does not. So, because the reason why is your rental is a business, and really the only taxes you take on it are your real estate tax, but that is like the only tax on a rental. So your income taxes won't apply to it, but the SALT limitation, the $10,000 limit, applies to Schedule A or the itemized deductions.
Well, I didn't understand any of that, what that meant, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, no worries.
All right.
So yeah, just keep taking your taxes on the rental for Mindy's kids. But
There you go, guys.
thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you. Got that resolved. Finally. Calling from an 818 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, Dave from Jamaica. How are you guys
Dave
doing?
from Jamaica. How are you?
I'm doing fine. I don't know if you guys are saving this for the Friday show or I missed it, but I heard the show Gutfeld, or however you pronounce his name, is canceled. Have you guys discussed that?
The show?
Yeah, his late
Wait,
night
it was
show.
canceled?
Yes, unless I misread the news.
I don't think.
I'm not seeing that it's canceled.
No, I don't think so. They're looking to hire comedy writers, though.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think I should apply?
Outside of that,
Supplement my work here.
sorry, go ahead.
And maybe I should just, apply and I can work nights there. Or Sam, you have a comedy writing background.
It probably doesn't take very long to write those scripts, as far as I can tell.
I think that was a Vic Berger joke, actually, that he did. Just like them taking down a billboard when they're actually putting it up. He just put it in the reverse.
Oh, okay.
Gotcha.
They're saying that his
Vic Berger
ratings.
threw me off.
They're saying Gutfeld's debut week crushed the Tonight Show. What? And nearly ties Jimmy Kimmel. This was 6 minutes ago, just reported via Business Wire. That was Gutfeld. Oh.
What time is this show on?
11 p.m. to 12 a.m.
okay.
weekdays.
It's the
yeah.
it's competing with the
What's
late night shows.
What's his lead in?
Laura Ingraham, maybe?
Gotta
Oh no,
be, right?
Shannon Bream. And why do I know these things?
Tucker at 8, Hannity at 9.
Laura Ingraham
at 10, Gutfeld at 11.
Yeah. Oh, so they got rid of Shannon Bream. Got it.
I think so. I'm
Just
not
a
sure.
bunch of Nazis lined up. Real fun.
God, Laura Ingraham, you don't hear too much from her anymore. Like, Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham are dinosaurs in that industry. They are not a part of this new right movement that Tucker Carlson's building.
Well,
Laura Ingraham is very
Laura
much.
Ingraham, very much was a pioneer in that.
I'm not hearing anything. I don't think she has
Not
the
yet.
audience.
She'll be back. They probably just rotate through as to who's going to take the lead on this.
She
what
gets
else
a couple
you got,
of
Dave?
moments.
Yeah.
What else you got, Dave?
Oh, well, also I was wondering with the Bessemer thing, is it a case of if they thought it was a long shot, right? Why highlight it then? You know what? In other words, draw so much public attention, because I guess strategically looking at it, wouldn't it be displaying a weakness?
Yeah, that's part of the criticism. Appreciate the call. I mean,
Right.
Who knows what the motivation with that, but that's part of the criticism. Like, it's a long shot. Why are you putting so much pressure on it? Calling from a 719 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, this is Tyler from Austin.
Tyler from Austin. What's on your mind?
Hey, so I called you a while back. I know you'll know this name, but I figured talking about evangelicals today. I'm a former evangelical. I was on track to be a pastor. I was an intern at Ted Haggard's church, like probably 10 years ago.
Ooh, tough timing.
Yeah. Didn't know him personally or anything, and I'm no longer, I consider myself agnostic now, but I just wanted to, thank you for the interview. I think a lot of people not from that world don't understand a lot about it. And what she said about abortion being such a pivotal issue, evangelicals, is spot on. I'm convinced they would support almost anything as long as it's pro-life, quote unquote. And I think that the main thing that I'm hopeful about is there is definitely a generational change. There's still going to be, like you said, there's still going to be racism down the road. There's still going to be right-wing reaction. But a lot of younger evangelicals, like myself, are leaving. And those who aren't leaving, I know several who supported Bernie Sanders. So it's definitely just more intense as people leave. but I'm hopeful that it'll burn out
Oh.
your standard Christianity, but who knows?
A good point. We're losing you a little bit there, but interesting perspective on that. And I think we're going to see, I think it is going to be something that burns out. That is my guess. That is my guess. So Nomi, what is your perspective on the mayoral race?
Oh, really? We're going there? The mayoral race right now, I think, the polling is very minimal and it's not reflective of like all of New York City. So everyone just keep that in mind, like mayoral race, very low turnout, right? Always.
Who are you supporting?
I don't know yet. I'm not really in love with anybody. I think that we have a major, major, major crisis that we're not even really conceptualizing yet. And we don't really, like, everybody's just been pushing things like rent relief, we did receive a little bit of rent relief just recently, but like with budget, but everything has been basically pushed aside. And then whoever inherits the crisis post-COVID is going to inherit an avalanche of economic crises, small business crises in terms of the storefronts, stores and small businesses that have shut down. We understand like there's an exodus from New York that's been happening over the last year. Where is rent really at right now? What is it actually being? The values aren't even reflective of the market right now because now you have different, whether it's developers or it's your landlords, they're withholding releasing empty units right now to the market because they're afraid it's going to affect the market so much. And they just keep thinking that there's going to be some sort of relief program. So like people who are looking for apartments are like, well, why are the apartments, a little bit lower, but they're not as low as they should be given the exodus. So there is a major crisis about to happen. And I can tell you one thing for sure, Andrew Yang and maybe a few other candidates, not equipped for it. That's just my personal perspective. I think it's whoever is mayor is going to have a really difficult situation. It's like inheriting the economic crisis in Puerto Rico or inheriting the economic crisis in Greece.
Do you think so? I think there's it seems to me there also could be just like an explosion of 6 months from now, tons of people coming into the city and it, I think both scenarios seem to me to make some measure of sense.
I think capital's like looking for an opportunity to disaster capitalize in this too, a little bit too. Buy up distressed properties, buy the smaller, buildings that were from smaller developers or smaller real estate, right, and turn it into one giant like monopoly company. I don't know. I just don't think so. I think that there's small businesses. I mean, you see it when you walk down the street, how many businesses that you loved were part of it was already happening. This is already happening, by the way, way before COVID. Now, it's horrifying. So how does that change the fabric of New York? Not to mention the fact that our subway is like in disarray, and that's the lifeblood of the city. Not to mention that schools, are still owed, constitutionally owed money. And how does Governor Cuomo, what plays out if he steps down or not? He's definitely not running again. What happens with that power vacuum? And do we have the leadership that's equipped yet? I mean, the progressive pipeline is just starting to be built. But it's, the reality is the experience that you kind of pull from in these situations has been completely monopolized by some of the worst actors in New York.
Right.
So
just a shallow bench.
Yeah, it's a shallow bench. And there's a lot of stars that I think are incredible and like can't wait for them to rise up. But right now we're just in this really precarious situation. And there's some really interesting candidates running, but I think we have to keep in mind like the crisis we're facing. So I don't have a favorite at all. I don't really know what I'm going to do, to be honest. It's too late for someone to file.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from most people. I still don't know either, but
it's ranked choice.
Wish it was more inspiring. Yeah, this time around, but I won't be voting for Andrew Yang. I know that.
Yeah. The other thing to keep in mind is, so it's ranked choice voting. And so there's some dynamics happening right now where you might see some candidates team up with each other to kind of block out another candidate, like one that they know is not going to do well, but the other, and people run for office for all sorts of reasons, folks. Here's a secret. Not everyone who runs is running to win. They're running for the next race. They're running to cut a deal for the next thing that they're going to run for, or to raise their, name ID. I mean, look at Andrew Yang. Andrew Yang ran for president. Now he's the front runner of New York.
Nuts.
Who are you going to vote for, Sam?
I am registered in the 19th.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Remember.
So.
To be continued.
Calling from a 413 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Oh, I think that's me.
It is.
Hello?
Hello?
All right, give me a hot sec to take you off speakerphone. Hold on.
A hot sec, Sam.
All right. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
This is Dewey from Chicago.
Dewey from Chicago.
Correct. Okay. So I kind of wanted to call in to piggyback on Ron Johnson and Mindy a little bit, little combination.
Okay. This is getting weird, but go ahead.
Ron Johnson, I think he was on the right track and then got a little lost, as he does. He's not super brilliant. I think it is really hard for people to conceive amounts of money. And I think his idea of using like time was pretty useful, but he just totally botched it. So I think we should probably have a conversation about where a wealth cap would be. So to ask you first, like, do you have any number where you'd say no one should have more than X amount of dollars?
I mean, I think, gosh, it's hard for me to imagine, like, saying more than 20 or 50 million dollars, somewhere in that area. Like, I can see, like, I guess, okay. I mean, someone gets in a house that in an area, the value goes up and it's maybe $3 or $4 million that works against you. And then you have, I guess, a $10 million car. No, I mean, I to me, like maybe 20 million bucks. I don't know. Maybe
you're on it, man.
10.
Oh my God.
I don't,
you're pretty on it.
Maybe 10 million, I guess. I don't know. I mean, I think like,
all right.
I'm trying to sort of like work it into what I think is like, also somewhat doable for your average person, but I mean, 10 million.
So can we talk through it?
Yeah.
Okay. How many years have you ever saved $100,000 in that year?
I would say probably close to zero.
Yeah, that's pretty much everyone, right? $100,000 is big down payment on a house. That's twice the household income in the U.S. It's a lot of money to save, not even to make. So if you saved $100,000 every single year for 100 years, you'd have $10 million.
Okay, I got you. But I do know this, like when I was back in my actor days, I bought an apartment in New York and it like doubled in value in like 2 or 3 years. I mean, I didn't save that money, but I made that money. I mean, I guess, it's more or less the same, you know what I mean? And I had no idea what I was doing. I just was like, made a lot of money in sitcoms. And I was like, I'd like an apartment. And then, 5 years later, I'm like, oh my God, this is so easy to make money.
Yeah. Speculative wealth is like definitely a big part. That's basically how everyone is making their money. Is
right.
Just pouring it together so that everyone's grows. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you need to have the money in the first place, and then you need to have enough that you don't need. And then you put it into something that ends up growing exponentially.
Exactly. Yeah. One last thing is the reciprocal of this is, let's say you have $10 million. That means of a net wealth. You could give yourself $200,000 every year for 50 years and never work.
Right.
So anyone with more than, I would say, $10 million, like you just don't need it. People get by on like $100,000 for a family. It sucks. Not a great life, right? But so many Americans are doing it that like these other people have to give it up. They got to give up their money.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with the wealth cap, and it's never really even occurred to me to really think about like specifically what the dollar figure should be. Right now you have people who have hundreds of billions of dollars. I mean, it's like just I mean, it's just absurd. It's so absurd. And when you're talking like hundreds of billions of dollars, like you're not even like living amongst human beings. Do you know what I mean? Like you're just living in a completely different, like sort of plane of existence. It's nuts.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it would take about $400,000 or 400,000 years, which is the time that Homo sapiens have been around, saving $100,000 every year to make $40 billion.
Yeah. I mean, it's absurd. I mean, to be honest with you, like 10, 20, $50 million, like I can't really sort of conceive of that kind of money. Like, so it all seems like the same to me. Do you know what I mean? Like yes, but I also can't conceive of like saving $100,000 for, 100 years. I don't know. I can't conceive of that either, frankly.
Right. Right. I mean, it's impossible. That's the thing.
But
to actually work for that kind of money. Anyways.
Appreciate the call.
Have a good one, guys.
You too. Want to shout out two of Nomi's interviews that she premiered last week, both fitting today's topics. Would be a great fit for MR as well. A book about white supremacy, homegrown hate. Also a brilliant guy who spent 10 years in prison, wrote a book, plus what he's doing to fix the system now. Who's that second person?
Thank you. Yeah, his book just came out. Let me get the actual book title. Sorry, give me 1 second because I'll find it for you. But the full book title just came out today officially. But the first interview was with Sarah Kamali. She's amazing. I definitely want to have her back on. Sorry, guys. I'm having some issues finding it. But it's up in the archives. So it's Marlon Peterson, but his book is titled, it's not just Bird Uncaged. Bird Uncaged, an Abolitionist Freedom Song. So he was imprisoned at a young age, and it like sucked up. He was present for a murder. When he was a kid, I think he was a valedictorian of his class. He was in public housing in Brooklyn, and he like was hanging out with some guys, and they like had this idea to go hit up a shop in Manhattan. And he was out there on lookout outside, but really across the street, like, not even taking part, getting a drink or something, a soda. And then suddenly he heard the shots and he left, he ran home. And then later the cops went to his house and, he didn't tell his parents and they arrested him. And then he was imprisoned and he completely shifted his life. He got out of jail in 2009. Really just a beautiful person. It was a very powerful interview. I cried. It was, it was very powerful, but the book is incredible. He gave a wonderful TED talk as well. So I encourage you to check it out. And Sarah Kamali, she talked about this sort of strategic, and sort of psychological similarities between the far right here and Islamic extremism. And I know this is a very hot topic, so I urge you to watch it before you jump on me or Twitter, because she very thoughtfully breaks it down in a way that I hadn't really, it was an interesting conversation. So go check it out. Thank you. I appreciate you for pushing that out there.
All right, well, let me read a couple more IMs and then we'll get out of here. Damian, haven't you heard of this book, Jackpot by Michael Mechanic? I haven't read it yet, but it seems like a decent look at the ultra rich. Moon in the Lake, Robo Dogs, like the one in Black Mirror. Yeah, I think it was. I want to comment to rephrase Mindy's discussion yesterday. Oh yeah, we did this one. Kid tested, Politburo approved, late to the party, but it's funny to hear him say hurt dog barks while constantly crying that he's not racist. And it's unfair that people call him such. Yeah, it's true. Dulce Mochi, Dulce de Mochi. Some of the post-Bessemer analysis about people being duped by anti-union rhetoric like they are dumb, But who is going to pay these workers' bills if Amazon played hardball and shut the plant down? Yes, the labor fight is bigger than one plant, but the left sounds really out of touch when they don't acknowledge or plan fixes for that kind of potential fallout. Good point. Train rocks. I didn't like Sex in the City, but I would have liked to see how they would have handled Occupy Wall Street.
Yes.
BB Teach.
Probably not well.
See Kim.
Still, Cynthia would have been there.
Kevin from Philadelphia. Send that robo dog down here to Philly. We know how to handle robots. See Hitchbot. Coach McGurk in bed sick after the second Moderna shot. Hit me like a truck. Yeah, I've heard people say that. San Antonio says Till proposed Proposition B on the ballot next month to remove the ability of the SAPOA police union to collectively bargain. If you're interested in finding activists for interview, the advocacy group that came up with Proposition B on Twitter is Fix SAPD. Left is best. Follow up to my previous IM. John from San Antonio can hear this. I would love to hear him call in and talk about Prop B. Bearded Cripple. White supremacy is a global issue, and there seems to be links over here in the UK and US, like Tommy Robinson trying to get asylum in the US with the help of Ted Cruz, is reported by The Guardian. Chris Burdick, in answer to Emma's question, I know a drunk driver. Oh, yeah. Okay, here we go. I know it was a drunk driver because after he hit me on the bus bench, his front axle broke and he skidded to a stop. He was still on the scene when the cops showed up and booked him. His car wasn't going anywhere.
Oh,
Champagne.
wow.
Yeah. Folks, we're not going to have any more time for calls, so you might as well
Also,
hang
you
up
could
now.
potentially file a complaint with the cops. I mean, I don't know if you got injured by this drunk driver.
Champagne Communista. Hey, Samantha, I won't be able to pay my sub fee this month because I'm going to cover the expenses for the Dollar Tree that was looted, which is going to be around the same amount. I'll get back to you next month, though. P.S. Are you able to conceive 1 million spicy McChickens? I suck at math, too, and this life hack has helped me a lot. You're welcome. Chicago letter carrier. I'm a guy and I'm experiencing some fairly rough side effects, but nearly full symptom free after the JJ vaccine. Thank you, Nomi. Not sure I followed.
Oh, because of the JJ. Maybe the part about the blood clot in women. Oh, because I think he texted in earlier about getting it, and then we did a response, and then he followed up. Maybe.
Ryan Cole, as per Gutfield's ratings, he's on at 11 p.m. Eastern. He's on at 8 p.m. Pacific. So, of course, he's going to beat shows that come on at 11:30 in both time zones. Fox doesn't do 3-hour delays in its programming the way that traditional networks do. Interesting. Fidget, bacon, fruits. No me. Any chance to come back to Arizona to kick cinema's butt in 2024? My disabled ass would put all my energy into campaigning for you.
It's a very kind thing. I have not lived in Arizona since I was in college, or a little bit after, briefly, but I don't think that would be a smart move.
Very sweet, though. Nice.
Very sweet. I would how about this? Kirsten Sinema can move to New York, and then I can challenge her there.
Boom.
Good.
No?
And then open seat in Arizona kind of win.
That was it. Genius. Yeah. And Sam can challenge Schumer, and we can just have so much fun.
Right, exactly.
8 more IMs. Shane from Canada. My family's Catholic and can say the more extreme members are anti-vaxxers and believe in climate change, but welcome it so the world can end and they can see Jesus. Oy. The most use my conversations will have with those members presented to show their kids how sociopathic those beliefs are. Well, that has value. The Tim Caucus. Does Nomi have any thoughts on Andrew Yang's policy proposals for a People's Bank and to increase resident representatives on the Housing Authority Board?
I don't know if it's necessarily just his proposals. I mean, great. People's Bank, I have to look into more. I don't know. I have to look at the details of his perspective on that. But yeah, there should be absolutely more citizens on all boards. I mean, you look at NYCHA board, you look at the MTA board, and you have developers on the MTA board. Yes, I think that there should be more civilians, New York City residents on all of these boards that are overseeing our public institutions and services, definitely. And they're appointed by the mayor and the governor. Sorry, just to.
Boston Baked Bob. Sam, you pathetic little shit goblin. You look like you just crawled out of a Happy Meal bag. I love the show and wanted to suggest Michael Pollan as a guest. He writes a lot on the politics of food. Of course, I know who Michael Pollan is. I think I've interviewed him in the past.
I'm reading his book right now, the one on the psychedelics.
Are you blowing by the initial comment? Is this like a making fun of certain intricate insults level that you on Twitter?
Well, I don't think so. I just took it as just a straight insult. I didn't really think it was loaded in anything other than what I took it at face value.
All right.
Really cool. Want to shout out to two of Nomi's interviews that she premiered last week. Both fit. Oh yeah, we got that one already. Sammy Key. What were the metrics for Brewster's Millions? Boy wonder. You tell me that Sex and the City doesn't have you in that sweet millionaire club, Sam? It was just one appearance, sadly.
Also the best one. Can we just talk about that?
I do get, I still get checks from that. They're like $8 or something like that. Yeah.
Really? That's it? I would expect way more. Like
it's 20 for one episode? One episode. I wasn't paid that much. I mean, the residuals at this point, I don't know. Maybe it's possible I get like 50 over the course of a year.
It's always on.
It's always
I'll tell you
on
where I get a
feed.
lot of residuals from Bob's Burgers.
Nice.
Sick.
Yeah.
Do you have to, is there a negotiation? Like you get a percentage of the residuals and that's why it was lower? Or was it because it was earlier in the season or earlier in the show?
No, it's just SAG. It's just set residuals. They negotiate. It's all union or set. And, unless you are like some leads of some shows have percentage in the back end, and in which case, then that's when you're talking the millions of dollars. But Winnipeg Craig. I've said it before, but you should have Ethan Klein from H3 on the show. He was one of the ones that originally brought the attention to David Dorbrick and to a lesser degree, James Charles. He's a goofy guy, but he's one of the best people to talk and understand YouTube culture. Maybe. I'm not sure, how much I'm interested in YouTube culture in and of itself, but Trumpy Bear, the immortal words of Meghan McCain, my father, my father, my father. And the final I am of the day. Chomsky Hunk. Hi, Sam, Tax Pro here. Yesterday, during your conversation with Mindy, I believe you overstated the impact of the SALT deduction being capped. This is only relevant if the taxpayer itemizes their deductions. And doing so has been far less common since Trump doubled the standard deduction. Maybe Mindy is upset because her bougie offspring earned too much to get any of that sweet, sweet stimmy cash. All right. Well, there you go. See you folks tomorrow. Check out Nomi's show. Good job, Nomi. Good job, Emma.
Thanks, Sam.
Brendan, great job today. Flying solo. Kyle, thanks for helping out. See you tomorrow. No music. No music. No music. And goodbye.
Ah.